are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to this week's webinar, Environmental Management System, the new ISO 14001-2015 EMS Awareness Training. My name is Aaron, Product Manager for Health, Safety and Environment. This webinar will be presented by PECB's partner Stephen Lim. Stephen is the Managing Director of JP Power Horizon. Stephen, please you may start the presentation.
Thank you, Aaron. Welcome, colleagues and friends. And I'm Stephen from Malaysia. Thank you very much for your attendance for tonight's briefing on the understanding of ISO 14000-2015. Well, since this is a 45 minutes presentation, I will make it short, brief, and concise. We'll leave any questions to all the on the presentation later on. All right, if you're ready, I shall present now. This is a presentation on a simple briefing on the understanding of ISO 14000-2015. Basically, as we all know, the ISO 14000-2015 will be due somewhere around this year. However, the exact date of the release has not been confirmed up until this very moment. In this briefing, we shall look at the principal changes that have been proposed in the draft. Let's look at the imaging requirements of the ISO 14000-2015. Please take note that since the contents are under development, there may be further changes as later on. As you can see on this slide, here are the basic high-level structure of the new ISO 14000. The main requirement here will be the clause 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And in the following slides, I shall give the presentation on the changes and the requirements. The first and foremost, the most important thing under this new ISO requirement will be some change of the definitions and the terms. As you can see on the screen right now, the word documented information shall now refer to record, while the context of the organization refers to the organization environment, which include business environment, internal factors such as organization culture, external factors such as the social economy condition under which it operates. Now, this is the first slide of the changes. As you can see here, this is actually a comparison between the ISO 14000-2015 and the ISO 14000-2004. Well, the comparison, as you can see on the screen here, would be under the ISO 14000-2015, there is a new requirement under clause of 4.1, and as well as there's a new requirement under clause 4.2, subsequently followed by the existing clause of 4.3 and 4.4. Briefly, ISO 14000-2015 requires organizations to identify, monitor, and review any external and internal issues that are relevant to its purpose and strategic direction, and which can impact the environmental management system of the intended organization. Now, under this new clause, 4.2, let's understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. Under this new requirement 4.2, the organization is required to determine the relevant requirements of relevant interested parties. Well, the words relevant interested parties shall consist of internal interested party, external interested party, shareholders, authorities, and other relevant parties. The following slide here, as you can see, is 4.3, which was initially under the previous clause if you compare with the previous ISO 14000-2004. Basically, the requirement for scope of the environmental management system shall remain the same. As you can see, the words which I underline, the scope of the environmental management system is to define by the organization. Under 4.4, to the Annex XL text, ISO 14000 adds a reminder that the purpose of the EMS is to enhance environmental performance. In these slides, we shall see Clause 5, a new clause. As you can see, the word leadership and commitment 5.1, environmental policy 5.2, and role, responsibility, authority 5.3. 5.1 is currently non-existent in the ISO 14000-2004, whereas environmental policy 5.2 is actually the same as 4.2 environment policy in the current ISO 14000, while 5.3 is similar to 4.4.1 resources, roles, responsibility, and authority under the present ISO 14001. Now let's look at this new requirement, leadership and commitment 5.1. In short, this requirement, which is very important, adds that top management has to demonstrate its leadership and commitment, and most importantly, taking accountability for the effectiveness of the environmental management system of its organization. In this slide, 5.2 environment policy basically is almost the same as the current clause. First, it says it shall be appropriate to the nature and scale environmental impact organization, and the following sentences shall appear or shall exist in environmental policy clause 5.2. Under this clause 5.3, roles and responsibilities, it was formerly under 4.4.1 of the ISO 14000-2004. The most important thing which I have bolded in the words which I have bolded mentions that specifically they need to assign responsibility and authority for ensuring that the requirements set forth in the ISO are met and environmental management system processes are delivering their intended outcomes. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now moved to the following slide. Clause 6, Planning of ISO 14000-2005. As you can see in comparison, under the clause 6, 6.1.1, it mentions actions to address risks and opportunity. Clause 6.1.2, Expect. 6.1.3, Compliance obligation. 6.1.4, Threats. And 6.1.5, Action, which basically is similar. I wouldn't say similar entirely, but it's actually similar to clause 4.3.1 as a fact, as well as 4.3.2 legal and other requirements of the present ISO 14000. 6.2 objectives is actually 4.3.3 objectives, targets, and program of the current ISO 40001. Now let's look at the changes in the clause 6. Clause 6.1 says it is a new requirement where organizations are required to consider their context when planning for their environmental management system. This means they have to think about the internal and external issues they face and the relevant requirements of the relevant interested parties when they set up their environmental management system. Under 6.1, 6.1.1, this subclause introduced a new requirement for organization to determine those risks and opportunities that have the potential impact onto the operation and performance of the environmental management system. 6.1, same thing. The requirements related to planning to take action to be contained within 6.1.5. For example, take action to address the significant environmental aspects falls under clause 6.1.2. Take actions on compliance obligations falls under clause 6.1.3. Take actions on environmental risk and opportunity falls under clause 6.1.4, and the need to establish environmental management system objectives is under clause 6.2, which we'll be talking about it in a short while. In this slide, objectives 6.1.2, environmental objectives must be measurable, take into account the significant aspects, the compliance obligations, and the threats and opportunities, and they must be monitored in order to determine whether they are being met. They must also be communicated across the organization and be updated as and when the need arises. As you can see, the words which I have underlined, these are the key areas that we have to make sure this clause is met. Ladies and gentlemen, as we can see on this slide here, the clause 7 clause 7 of ISO 14000:2015 comprises of number 1, resources 7.1, competence 7.2, awareness 7.3, communication 7.4, and documented information 7.5. In comparison with ISO 14001, these requirements fall under the present clauses of 4.4.1, 4.4.2, 4.4.3, 4.4.4, 4.4.5, and 4.5.4. Now, ladies and gentlemen, shall we move to the next slide and see what are the changes and the new requirements under the clause 7. As you can see on this slide, 7.1, resources. It requires an organization initially to determine and then subsequently provide the resources necessary to establish, implement, maintain, and continually improve its environmental management system. In 7.2, it mentions here that the organization must determine the competency requirements for those people performing work under its control. Once these competency requirements have been determined, the organization must then ensure that those people possess the necessary competencies either on the basis of, now take note here, on the basis of their education, training, or experience. Well, you can see the word competency is very important, and the words people performing work under its control. So who are these people performing work under its control? Well, it could be their people, their staff, their own staff, contractors who perform the work on their behalf, all right, indirect or direct suppliers who are performing work on their behalf. 7.3, awareness. As you can see over here, this requirement, the requirements contained in this clause 7.3 shall now apply to all persons doing work under the organization's control. Take note, all persons doing work under the organization's control. Well, this is more expensive than under the ISO 14000:2004, where the difference is the organization needed to ensure its personnel. So as you can see here, is a big difference between the word its personnel, which refers to its people, its staff, as compared with the words persons doing work under the organization's control, which this has broadened the scope of the people. The competency and awareness of persons under the control of the organizations, as I can say, is broader as compared with the word its personnel. 7.4. Under this clause 7.4, there is this subclause 7.4.1, which says it encompasses all internal and external communication relating to organization environmental management system. My apology, I have not changed with the word the quality management system over here. It was a typo error. 7.5, as you can see the big words over there. Documented information. So if you remember on the very first few slides, I put it there, documented information refers to records. Now, it confirms that an organization's EMS includes both documented information as identified in ISO 14000 and documented information identified by the organization as necessary for the effective operation of its EMS. Alright, now formally it falls under 444 documentation, 4.4.5 document control, and 4.5.4 control records. Now let's look further into the following slides over here. When documented information is created or updated, the organization must ensure that it is appropriately identified and described. Well, the word describe and identify could mean the title, the date, the author, the reference number, the indexing number, etc. The organization must determine how it will distribute, assess, retrieve, and use the documented information. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see over here, this has broadened the scope of if compared with the current ISO 14000 clauses. The word documented information, it is still almost the same. However, they have changed the word to documented information. Next, my friends, Clause 8. This is the core of the ISO 14000:2015. Clause 8, operation planning and control, is actually Clause 4.4.6 operational control, and also it covers 4.4.7 emergency preparedness and response of ISO 14000:2004. Ladies and gentlemen, let's look at 8.1, operational planning and control. The new control focus and requirements center on ensuring that processes are implemented as planned, including actions to address risk and opportunities. This needs to be evidenced by means of documented information. Clause 8.2, emergencies. This is a subclause, which is basically identical to clause 4.4.7 of the present ISO 14000:2004. The requirement of identification of emergency situation as part of the first paragraph of the current edition has been relocated to 6.1.2, which is identification and evaluation of significant aspects, which means it says if you conduct evaluation of aspect impact, if you found any significant aspects, the significant aspect may link to emergencies. Clause 9, performance evaluation, which consists of a monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation, 9.1, internal audit, 9.2, and management review, 9.3. Now, sitting next to the box, as you can see under ISO 14000:2004, it is actually 4.3.2 legal, 4.5.1 monitoring and measurement, 4.5.2 evaluation of compliance, 4.5.5 audits, and 4.5.6 management review. Let's look at 9.1, monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation. It stipulates that what needs to be monitored and measured, and it shall be related to operations, the compliance obligations, the operational controls requirements, and it has to progress towards meeting the environmental objective using measurable indicators. Under the clause of 9.2 internal audit, this requirement requires an organization to carry out internal audits at planned intervals in order to determine whether the environmental management system conforms to the involved environment, the organization's own requirements, as well as the requirements of ISO 14000:2015. Well, basically, it is still the same as the present internal audit requirement of the ISO 14000:2004. The big difference would be there is no longer a requirement for organization to establish a documented internal audit procedure. However, organizations may still choose to operate one if they so wish. And as you can see on this slide here, clause 9.3 management review. It requires an organization to review the environmental management system, and this review must be undertaken by top management, of course at planned intervals, and the purpose of the review is to ensure the environmental management system is continually suitable, adequate, and effective. There's one requirement says here, it is a requirement for the organization to retain documented information as evidence of the results of the management review. And ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the last clause of the ISO 14000. Clause 10, improvement. There are two clauses under the clause 10, improvement, which are 10.1, non-conformity and corrective action, and continuing improvement 10.2. And this is is similar to the clause of 4.5.3 of the ISO 14000:2004. Now, let's look at 10.1, non-conformity and corrective action. This requirement sets out how the organization is required to act when non-conformity is identified. In such instances, the organization is required to take whatever action is necessary to control and correct the non-conformity and deal with any resultant consequences. When there is a non-conformity, there is now an explicit requirement for organization to determine whether other similar non-conformities actually do or potentially could exist. There is also a requirement for the organization to determine whether changes are required to wider EMS in order to prevent a reoccurrence. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the last clause of the ISO 14000. Clause 10.2, continual improvement. Clause 10.2 requires the organization to work continually to improve its environmental management system in terms of its suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see here, this is a briefing. I have not disclosed the details of the entire ISO 14000:2015. This is a briefing in order for us to know the comparison or the differences or the similarities between the present ISO 14000:2004 against the future ISO 14000:2015. Now, I believe most of us have gone through the previous briefing on the ISO 9001:2015, and I believe you can see there is a similarity between the ISO 9001:2015 and the ISO 14000:2015. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope this briefing has given you some view of the changes and the differences, as well as the similarities between the present ISO and the upcoming ISO 14000 2015. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I end my presentation. If you have any questions, please drop by, contact me, drop me an email, or you can speak to Aaron about it.
Stephen,
ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for your great presentation. Since we are going to organize more webinars for different topics and areas, please follow us in our social media and subscribe us in our YouTube channel. In addition, we are going to answer all your questions individually through email, so please feel free to write us for any questions you may have regarding this webinar. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed it, and have a good day.